Hello and welcome to Business Standards Morning Show. I am Ruchika Chatravanshi and let us take a look at the stories for today. Stars are making a return to India's big screens, drawing huge crowds to theatres that have suffered immensely because of COVID 19. In the past year, streaming platforms like Netflix and Hotstar had become the only avenue for producers. But star studded movies released during the Diwali weekend are trying to reverse this trend. Let us take a look at how these movies are faring at the box office.
Akshay Kumar and Ranveer Singh Suryavanshi has become the first big budget Bollywood film to be released on the big screen since the coronavirus outbreak. Directed by Rohit Shetty, this action drama was originally scheduled to arrive in cinema halls in March 2020, but it finally released on November 5th, a day after Diwali, after a delay of 19 months. The long wait, however, paid off for the makers of Suryavanshi as the movie released to a resounding response. It grossed 50 crore rupees in the 2 days of the Diwali weekend and is projected to garner 125 crore rupees in the first 7 days. That will be enough for the producers to break even. The movie has also become the biggest opening for Akshay Kumar. The film has already recovered part of the cost by selling digital rights to Netflix and broadcasting rights to Zee Entertainment, apart from its music rights. According to industry estimates, these three rights have been sold for roughly 200 crore rupees. Meanwhile, Tamil superstar Rajinikanth's Diwali release Annathe is also breaking records. The film opened to negative reviews from critics, but that has not stopped audiences from flocking the theatres to watch the superstar back in action. The film, which features a huge star cast, has collected 50 crore rupees in the first 2 days and is estimated to have already crossed 100 crore rupees in total earnings. The release of Hollywood film Eternals, the latest installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is adding variety to India's big releases after Diwali. The film experienced a strong weekend collection of about 18 crore rupees in India. But can this festival momentum sustain? Theatres are optimistic about more big releases, hoping they would put an end to their troubles. But some producers are still opting for direct OTT releases, leaving theatre owners displeased. In one such example, all 5 upcoming releases of Malayalam superstar Mohanlal are releasing on streaming platforms. On whether such platforms will eat into theatre revenues, this is what PVR Managing Director Ajay Bijli told Business Standards Ram Prasad Sahu in a recent interview.
When cinemas were shut, then obviously the content makers had to find an outlet to sell their movies. And also the people like Netflixes and Amazons of the world, they needed content to improve their subscription base. So I think whatever happened was because a very big revenue generating distribution platform, which is exhibition, was shut, not in India but all over the world. So therefore, these transactions got very highly accentuated and highly noticeable by everybody. But these things were happening even pre-pandemic. But now with the cinemas opening, you must have read that Disney also has announced for 21 is going to come on the big screen. Warner has announced that. Now, why I talk about Disney and HBO, Warner Brothers is because they've got their own platform. So they're very different from Netflixes of the world because they're creating content with Netflix and acquiring only for their own platform. However, Disney has got their own streaming service, and yet they're releasing the movies on the big screen. So I think it was a aberration that when the cinemas were shut, that these transactions were happening and a lot of content was going to the OTT platforms. But with the cinemas opening up, Some will continue to go, but a lot will also come on the big screen, enough for to make our numbers work.
Nevertheless, the Diwali box office performance has decisively shown that the public is more eager than ever to return to cinemas in the world's biggest movie market. The upbeat box office collection during the Diwali weekend comes despite the fact that as many as 1,000 screens have permanently shut down due to the impact of coronavirus lockdowns. Moreover, some states like Maharashtra, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh and Haryana are still allowing cinemas to operate with only 50% capacity. Maharashtra is the biggest market for Bollywood, accounting for around 30% of its all-India box office revenues.
Most of the states are at 50% capacity. Just a warm-up is going on. The marathon hasn't started. So I think at the time of a warm-up, it is difficult to say that, you'll be, doing the same what you were doing pre-pandemic. So I think probably you can say end of fourth quarter or beginning, God willing, beginning fourth quarter, I see things coming back to normal. As I said, it's a function of so many things. One variable is there should not be any third wave, or if it is benign. Second variable is that this 50% cap, which is there on all the capacities, that has to be lifted. So you're talking to somebody currently who has all these constraints. Only when these constraints get removed, then I have no doubt about it that people will go back and will reach the same revenues as the pre-pandemic level.
Multiplexes are now batting for the lifting of restrictions on theatre occupancy, but states are treading cautiously on this front as they look to prevent a third wave of COVID-19. India's daily COVID cases have dipped to a 9-month low, hovering near the 11,000 mark. If the current trend continues, it will not take long before cinemas start seeing revenue above the pre-pandemic levels.
When lockdown was imposed and schools were shut, scores of reports from various parts of the country spoke of students having to climb to the top of trees to attend virtual classes on their phones. In this Asian time, children risking their lives to get education shocked many. A majority of students in rural areas could not attend online classes at all during the pandemic as they had no internet connectivity. But one technology is promising to change all this: satellite-based broadband connectivity. What challenges does it face? Here's a peek into this new technology which promises to bridge this gap.
India had launched the BharatNet project in 2011 to ensure that every village panchayat in the country has broadband internet connectivity. But according to a report in 2020, half of India's population still does not have internet access, and 70% of the country's rural population is yet to log into the internet. Till date, BharatNet connections have been provided to 1.78 lakh gram panchayats. In June this year, the Union Cabinet approved the implementation of the project in 16 states through the public-private partnership model. When it comes to wired broadband, India had only 24.3 million customers at the end of August, most of whom are urban subscribers. Starlink and OneWeb are among a number of companies which use low Earth orbit satellites to provide high-speed broadband internet services around the world, with a special focus on remote areas where deploying mobile towers or fiber optic cables are difficult. These satellites can beam internet to virtually anywhere on the Earth. Sensing the opportunity, Starlink and OneWeb are looking to provide unserved areas with internet. Starlink is a subsidiary of Elon Musk's rocket company SpaceX, and OneWeb is owned by Sunil Mittal's Bharti Group along with the British government. Starlink is one of a growing number of companies launching small satellites as part of a low Earth orbiting network to provide low latency broadband internet services around the world, with a particular focus on remote areas that terrestrial internet infrastructure struggles to reach. Starlink has already deployed more than 1,700 satellites in low Earth orbit, against a target of having 12,000 satellites in its constellation. Meanwhile, OneWeb has put 322 satellites into orbit and plans to have 648 of them by the middle of next year. Starlink currently serves about 100,000 users in 14 countries. Recently, it established a subsidiary in India headed by former PayPal executive Sanjay Bhargava as it gears up to launch its services in the country. It has already received over 5,000 pre-orders for its devices in India. But there are some factors which could hit its Indian venture. The high cost is one of them. Starlink's service at the moment costs about Rs 7,300 per month. This is in addition to Rs 37,000 that customers have to shell out for the Starlink kit, which contains an antenna dish, a stand, its power supply, and a Wi-Fi router. Moreover, the antenna requires a clear view of the sky. Rural consumers in India cannot be expected to pay such huge sums for internet. Perhaps keeping this in mind, Starlink is seeking collaboration with Indian telcos like Jio and Vodafone Idea, as well as BharatNet and RailTel. Starlink is planning to have 200,000 connections in India by December 2022, of which 80% will be in rural areas. It has started applying for licenses, though there is no regulatory clarity over satellite broadband in India. There is uncertainty around the mode of spectrum allotment and the licensing framework. Things also get complicated as Starlink will make use of foreign satellites for its internet services in India. We spoke to Ankit Jain, Assistant Vice President of ICRA, to understand more about India's satellite broadband space.
See, Indian SATCOM space is not very much evolved as of now. To start with, how will the spectrum be allocated to these SATCOM providers? Will it be an allocation, administrative allocation as it used to happen before the Supreme Court annulled all the licenses? Or will it be a spectrum auction just like the ongoing spectrums, the ongoing telecom services where the requisite spectrum is auctioned via proper auction. So one is this. Second is which all bands will be put forward for this particular allocation. Now, in terms of cost structure, the initial costs in satellite communication are very high, given the fact that you have to set up an entire network of those LEOs. So the number of satellites required for a LEO transmission are much higher. Although cost per satellite for a LEO is lower, but then because you require a constellation of such satellites, the overall cost becomes pretty high when we set up a constellation of these satellites. Now, this has been the major impediment, even if you look at worldwide. Satellite B2C communication subscribers are not very significant. So although theoretically it sounds good that these services are not available in the remote areas, satellite will help in providing those services in the remote areas, but then the cost component comes into picture. The costs will remain pretty sizable. What plans they come up with, what is the typical cost involved on a running basis? Will they be sustainable if let's say they offer cheaper plans, will they be sustainable? So these things, these are some of the questions which will be answered over the course of time as they launch actually commercially. So I was saying government, has been trying a lot to connect the rural and remote areas, trying to bridge that gap. They did that NOFN, the BharatNet project, wherein they tried to connect the entire villages by fiber. But the hilly areas or the remote, actually the geographically difficult areas, there the connectivity remains a concern. Very extremely remote, extremely, the left-wing extremist areas, or maybe the hilly terrains where it is difficult to put fiber or even the towers. There, satellite can act as a good source for connectivity.
The Indian government is in the final stages of approving a new Spacecom policy that will underscore the role of low Earth orbit satellite systems in increasing internet coverage. Only once this policy is finalized, companies like Starlink will get some clarity over their future in India. Starlink is initially looking to give 100 devices for free to schools in Delhi and nearby rural districts as part of a pilot project. For this, it is seeking limited approval from the government.
197 Communications, the parent firm of Paytm, launched India's biggest initial public offering yesterday. And today, Sapphire Foods, the owner of Pizza Hut and KFC, will open its IPO for subscription. But since both these companies are loss making ventures, analysts have a word of caution for investors eyeing listing gains. Primary market investors are spoiled for choice as three companies are collectively looking to raise about 21,000 crore rupees via initial share sale this week. Of these, two companies, 197 Communications owned Paytm and Sapphire Foods, the owner of KFC and Pizza Hut chain of stores, are alone looking to raise about 18,000 crore and rupees 2,000 crore respectively. Touted as India's biggest public offer, Paytm's share sale was launched yesterday and has been subscribed less than 20% so far. It comprises a fresh issue of 8,300 crore rupees and an offer for sale for rupees 10,000 crore, and the company has already raised 8,235 crore rupees from anchor investors ahead of its share sale. The price band of the 3-day share sale, which concludes on November 10, has been fixed at Rs 2,080 to 2,150 per share. But analysts aren't very bullish given its extremely stretched valuation. According to Manan Doshi, co-founder of unlisted Arena, Paytm may fail to deliver on listing gains while long-term outlook also looks challenging.
Paytm has came up with the biggest IPO till date in India. On the financial front, Paytm has posted a revenue of 2,802 crores while a loss of 1,701 crores in FY21. I do not find the revenue growth exciting. The company has narrowed its losses mostly by constricting its marketing and advertisement expenses. Amongst all these recent startups, Paytm is an ideal example of well diversified businesses, but it lacks clear leadership in almost all the segments. At the upper band post issue, sales to market cap comes around 49x, which makes the issue quite expensive. Apart from the valuations, I believe its road to profitability is more challenging. As the sector is highly competitive, it is quite probable that Paytm will continue making losses in near future to safeguard its market share.
On the other hand, Sapphire Foods is planning to raise Rs 2,073 crore through its public issue at the higher end of the price band of Rs 1,120 to 1,180 per share. The company will launch its IPO today and the issue will close on November 11. Its valuation is around 7 times FY21 sales, which is lower than recently listed Devyani International, 14 times FY21, Westlife Development 9.3 times, Burger King 12.5 times, and Jubilant Foodworks 15 times. Let us go to Ajit Mishra, VP Research at Religare Broking, to have an overview of the company.
Sapphire stands to benefit from the positive industry growth trend given its substantial market presence and the scale, and moreover its strong relationship with the Yum brand and the continuous focus on delivering a great consumer experience bodes well for the company. And at the same time, the company aims to accelerate the conversion from the unorganized food services and also look for the inorganic growth opportunities. But at the same time, the financial performance has not been good as the revenue growth has declined, and the company has also incurred losses in the last 3 financial years. So while the long-term growth looks promising, but a turnaround in the company's financial performance would be the key monitorable.
Against this backdrop, which IPO looks best for listing gains and which one might offer good returns from a long-term perspective? Let us go to Gaurav Garg, Head of Research at Capital Via Global, to know more.
Paytm has got a very diversified business model on the bank of the digital transaction ecosystem that it built. It has got almost 35 crore customers as of now, of which around 5 crore are active customers. On top of that, it has a tie-up with almost 4 crore retail merchant outlets, which is huge. And in future, if it is able to cross-sell and upsell the services to this set of customers, I think it can become a mammoth, probably a Bajaj Finance like company in future. However, the valuation looks pretty expensive and listing gains could be limited. If an investor is interested in subscribing to this particular business model, they can get into this particular IPO. However, they should get into this with a long-term outlook as listing gains would be limited.
Hence, as both the companies are near pioneers in their sectors, investors with high risk-taking appetite and long-term view can subscribe to both these issues. Short-term investors, meanwhile, who are only interested in listing gains, may invest in Sapphire Foods. Apart from these IPOs, stock-specific action will continue to dominate the market trend on Tuesday amid the last leg of corporate earnings. Among the 160 companies that are set to report their September quarter earnings today, the prominent ones that will be on investor radar include BHEL, Hindustan Copper, M&M, and Petronet LNG. FII trends over the next few days will also hog the limelight as the stock exchanges and the other market infrastructure institutions have come out with a roadmap for the implementation of T+1 settlement cycle. The settlement cycle will be implemented in a phased manner and will apply only to the bottom 100 companies starting February 25. And from March 2022 onwards, the next bottom 500 stocks will be available for introduction to T+1 settlement. Can you purchase gold for 1 rupee? Well, you can't. At least not at your conventional jewelry store. However, you can buy digital gold online for as little as 1 rupee. But what exactly is digital gold? And what are the pros and cons of investing in digital gold? Let us understand in this explainer.
Digital gold is a virtual method of buying and investing in the yellow metal without having to physically hold the gold. You can buy it online and the minimum buy or sell value is 1 rupee. Why is this important? Buying physical gold has certain downsides. Firstly, there is the issue of identifying its purity and legitimacy. And secondly, there are challenges associated with safekeeping and storage. On the other hand, digital gold is bought online and it is stored in insured vaults by the seller on behalf of the buyer. And what about the purity of the gold in question? The metal purchased is 24 karat gold or 99.5% pure. Also, the buyer can be assured of its purity as it is certified by government licensed agencies. There are other benefits of investing in digital gold. For one, the investor can take physical delivery of the gold at his or her doorstep. It is also highly liquid. One can easily buy or sell units anytime and anywhere. The digital gold you've bought can be used as collateral for online loans. Not only is your purchase stored safely, but it is also 100% insured. Last but not least, you can exchange it for physical gold in the form of jewelry, coins, and bullion. In India, there are 3 main companies that offer digital gold: MMTC PAMP India, Augmont Gold Limited, and Digital Gold India. Meanwhile, applications such as PhonePe and Paytm offer a platform for investing in digital gold. In August of 2021, the exchanges asked stockbrokers to stop selling digital gold. The directive reportedly came to the exchanges from the Securities and Exchange Board of India. Subsequently, the exchanges sent a circular to brokers to comply with the guidelines. Therefore, stockbrokers have stopped selling digital gold, while mobile wallets and investment platforms continue to do so.
That's all we have for you today. We will be back with more news and analysis. Stay tuned and thank you for watching.
If you like this video, share it and subscribe to Business Standard. For more news, views and insights, log on to www.business-standard.com. Do also follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Telegram and LinkedIn.